Do you accept that if there is an attempt to move the Palestinian population out of Gaza completely, that would represent ethnic cleansing and a war crime? Do you accept that in principle?
Absolutely not. I think President Trump put it forward, and he said that it should require consent. If somebody in Gaza wants to move now to a different place, he should be allowed to do it. Nobody should force him. But if he wants to move
out... What if they don't want to? What if it's involuntary?
If you want to move now from London to New York, or from New York to...
Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, we have yet another jaw-dropping display from Israel's Ambassador Danny Danon, a man who seems determined to embarrass himself every time he sits down for an interview. Just a few days ago, he was humiliated on Sky News, and now he walks straight into the lion's den with Piers Morgan, only to get shredded again. Honestly, I'm glad he keeps showing up on these platforms, because the more he talks, the more the mask slips. Every appearance just exposes the spin, the contradictions, and the blatant denial of reality. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now let's break down exactly how Piers Morgan dismantled the ambassador's talking points and why this exchange is sending shockwaves across the conversation on Gaza.
Many images coming out of Gaza of starving children. We're not making this up. And if you really believe it's not happening and all of this is a blood libel, then again, and I've had this conversation with you before, you should be pressurizing your prime minister to allow international media to go into Gaza to verify exactly what is happening. But, I want to play you a clip. This is from the BBC. Oh, hang on. I want to play you a clip from Jeremy Bowen.
You're spreading so many lies.
Hang on one second. Ambassador, with respect, I will let you respond. I will let you respond. But I will let you respond, but let me just play one clip to you of the BBC's Middle East editor, Jeremy Bowen, who's reported from every war zone in the last 25, 30 years. Here's what he reported for the BBC.
So the Jordanians have passed on a message from the Israelis. The Israelis don't want us to film out of the window at the devastation inside Gaza. But I've spent 10 minutes looking at it with my own eyes. And I can tell you that communities in the north of Gaza that I knew well, very vibrant, tens of thousands of people living hard lives, but actually with a remarkable human spirit, are flat. There's nothing left of them.
Now, that's the truth, isn't it, Ambassador? You don't want journalists to go in there because what they're going to uncover and report to the world is utterly horrifying. You have destroyed 2/3, if not more now, of the Gaza Strip. You've displaced 2 million people into a very small area of the Strip. And you now have ministers who you say we shouldn't take seriously, but whose views are never publicly corrected or condemned by Prime Minister Netanyahu. So Smotrich and Ben-Gvir talk openly now about a plan to remove all Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and from the West Bank. And you simply say as the ambassador, well, you shouldn't take them seriously. Why shouldn't we?
Yes,
why shouldn't we? I've not heard Netanyahu. Netanyahu doesn't say what they're saying is wrong.
Keep going. If that's an interview, keep going. For 6 minutes now.
No, now you can respond.
You're sharing movies.
I'm not spreading lies.
Wait, if I would have to respond, each allegation, it would take us 15 minutes now. So when you say a lie,
tell me the lie.
You spoke about the New York Times picture. Let's speak about that for a minute. That was blood libel. When you put a picture of a sick Palestinian boy who had a disease and you claim that he was starving, that was a lie. And by the way, they retracted that. But the way they retracted it was also shameful. They put it in a small page on their Twitter with
but to be clear, I said that other children were starving. I said other children were starving. Do you deny that?
No, you said that this boy was also starving. You want to rewind it 2 minutes ago?
The boy is clearly,
he was also starving.
The boy was clearly emaciated, Ambassador. Clearly emaciated. So yes, he has a medical condition, but also he's clearly not eating. Do you accept that if there is an attempt to move the Palestinian population out of Gaza completely, that would represent ethnic cleansing and a war crime? Do you accept that in principle?
Absolutely not. I think President Trump put it forward, and he said that it should require consent. If somebody in Gaza wants to move now to a different place, he should be allowed to do it. Nobody should force him. But if he wants to move out...
What if they don't want to? What if it's involuntary?
If you want to move now from London to New York, or from New York to London, you can do that. You can apply for a student visa.
I'm asking about if it's involuntary.
No,
what if it's involuntary?
No, absolutely not. I'm talking about consent from both sides. Consent.
Right, but if there's no consent, do you accept if there is no consent from the Palestinian people to be moved, displaced out of Gaza?
Absolutely.
Let me finish my question. Ambassador, let me ask you a precise question so the viewers can understand. if it is done without their consent, in other words, they are forcefully displaced out of Gaza, out of the West Bank, would you accept that is ethnic cleansing and a war crime if that is what happens?
No one is speaking about that. That is something which is not acceptable.
They are. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are literally talking about that.
No one
They're
is
two
speaking
senior
about,
members of your government.
No one is speaking
They
about...
are literally speaking about it, Ambassador. With respect, they are literally, that is what they're speaking about.
I'm a representative of the Israeli government, and I'm telling you, and you can look at the protocols of all the debates in the government and the cabinet. It was never discussed. It's not on the table. And also President Trump's vision was about offering a possibility for people to relocate. It happened in Ukraine. It happened in different areas in the world when people wanted to move to a different place. If they want to do it, and by the way, they can come back afterward if they want to. But why only the people in Gaza are not being allowed to even think about a future in a different place? Why, if they want to live in one of the Arab countries, or if they want to come to the US or to Europe, why not even giving them the option to discuss it? Why you say, no, you have to stay there for eternity, when all other citizens of the world are allowed to think about a future in a
And here's where things take a truly shocking turn. When Piers pressed the ambassador with a direct, clear-cut question, asking whether the forced removal of the Palestinian population from Gaza would constitute a war crime, the ambassador's answer was an astonishing, absolutely not. Think about that for a second. This is someone who claims to represent a nation committed to international law, yet he can't even recognize one of the most basic definitions of a war crime. That alone should set off alarm bells. And instead of addressing the reality, he tried to brush it off by saying, nobody is speaking about it. But that's just not true. In fact, even Israeli media has reported that senior ministers, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, have openly floated plans to level Gaza City and seize control outright. This isn't some fringe conspiracy. This is coming from the very heart of his government. So when the ambassador sits there denying it, pretending these conversations aren't happening, it doesn't just look dishonest. It makes him look completely detached from his own political reality.
Why don't Israelis move out of Israel then and let the Gazans go and live there?
Well, Israelis, if they want to move, they can move. And the people of Gaza, if they want to find a different future, they should be allowed to do that. But I think you touched a point. I think some people in Gaza, the radicals, they don't want a better future. They don't care about the future of their children. They care about eliminating Israel. And that is the core of the problem. It's not about where they live and how they live. It's about, the fact that some elements in Gaza, the radicals one, don't want to see the existence of Israel, period. Read the constitution of Hamas. Read what the muwakama, the resistance for the jihadic means. That's the essence of their existence. And even today, when there are negotiations offering them to go to exile, to live a very good life in different countries in the Middle East, you know what they say? We don't want to live in a different place. We want to stay in Gaza and to fight the jihad against Israel. That is the main problem. If you look to what happened in the last 20 years, how many billions of dollars were invested in Gaza by the UN, by the US, by the EU, and that money wasn't used to build a better society, a better future. It was used to build hate and weapons of mass destruction against Israel.
The biggest problem, it seems to me, Thomas Friedman, the New York Times columnist, wrote a great column today in which he said the reality of what is happening now in this war is that you have the worst Palestinian leadership ever with Hamas, and you have the worst, most far right-wing Israeli government ever as well. In other words, you have the worst of the worst leading both sides in this war, both of whom now appear increasingly wedded to the destruction of the other. And the victims in all this are the Israeli citizens and the Palestinian citizens who are not members of Hamas, or the Israelis who are not signed up to this worldview expressed by Gvir and Smotrich of getting rid of all Palestinians. That is not what most Israelis actually want, I don't believe. Maybe they do. I don't believe they want a form of ethnic cleansing. What they want is to try and get a solution of peace, but there is no will for peace. There's no will on the Israeli government side to bring this to an end. Because the moment it ends, Netanyahu gets held accountable for what happened on October the 7th, and he has to be back in a criminal court facing corruption charges. He has no incentive to end it. Hamas have no incentive to end it either. They just want to keep killing as many Jews as they can possibly kill. I don't make any pretense that that's what they want to do. But you have the worst of the worst leaders on both sides now in an implacable war which shows no sign of ending, and neither side wants it to end. And that is the absolute tragedy about what is happening now in Gaza.
Piers, it's a shameful comparison. How dare Thomas Friedman equate the Prime Minister of Israel, who was elected by the people of Israel, to the Hamas regime? We have a democracy. We have elections. Prime Minister Netanyahu was elected. Hamas took over control over Gaza, and there was no elections there, and they actually shoot the opposition there. So to make that comparison, it's shameful. It's shameful, and that Prime Minister Netanyahu, and you can say a lot of things about him, but he always tried to delay conflicts and to avoid wars. But this war was brought upon us, and he had no choice to defend Israel and to fight to bring hostages back. That is his responsibility.
And this right here is the perfect example of how propaganda works in real time. No matter what evidence is put in front of the ambassador, even reports from respected journalists like Jeremy Bowen of the BBC, who has covered nearly every major conflict of the last 3 decades, he denies, he deflects, and he spins. You could hand him photographs, eyewitness accounts, or footage straight from the ground and it wouldn't matter. He'd twist it, flip it upside down, and find a way to blame anyone else while dodging accountability. It's a pattern we've seen time and time again. The tactics are always the same. Deny reality, shift the focus, and confuse the public so the truth gets buried under layers of distraction. And it's worth remembering the words of Nelson Mandela, who once said, "Your enemies are not our enemies." That statement speaks volumes even today, because the propaganda machine thrives on convincing people that division and hatred are the only options. So let me throw it over to you. What do you make of this exchange? Do you think the ambassador's denials convince anyone outside of his own echo chamber? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Until next time, this has been The Whip Line. Thanks for tuning in.